Hi guys, Novak Djokovic, the #1 tennis player in the world, got deported and banned from Australia for not being vaccinated. I don't care about tennis, but this story is totally nuts. However, there are a couple of facts which I couldn't align inside my head, so I decided to dig a little bit deeper and find out what was the real reason of his denial. So, we have Novak Djokovic, who's a really famous tennis player from Serbia. However, this guy is vocal 5G anti-vaxxer. He's also a proponent of gluten-free diet. He also believes in some crazy conspiracy that you can talk to the water and the molecules will react to your emotions. Basically, he's one of the adherents of modern anti-science religion. I have very little respect to that, but Australia tolerates Jews, Muslims and Christians, which have quite a similar ancient conspiracy theories. So by the same principle, Djokovic should be tolerated as well. His story is the following. Djokovic wanted to attend Australian Open in Melbourne. As a Serbian national, he needs a visa to get inside Australia. And he got one from the federal authorities. But having a visa is not enough nowadays. You either need to be vaccinated or you need to have a medical exemption. And Djokovic applied for exemption since he got COVID just a month ago. And the Ministry of Health of Victoria approved it. But when he arrived at the border on January 5, Australian Border Force cancelled his visa and denied his entrance on grounds of his medical exemption is no longer valid. Djokovic's lawyer went to the court to appeal this decision. The appeal was successful and on January 10 the entrance was granted and he even got compensation for mistreatment. In the same time, the mass media started to push the narrative that Djokovic met with journalists and had a bunch of selfies the day after he got positive test result, meaning that he either a complete jerk intentionally exposing people with COVID or his test was simply fake. Additionally, Djokovic failed to disclose that he was visiting different countries on his Australian arrival health declaration, which usually is a minor problem, but media made this as it was some kind of a big lie. Anyway, Alex Hawke, the Australian Minister of Immigration, on January 14 exercised his power and cancelled Djokovic visas on health and good order grounds on the basis that it was in the public interest to do so. The Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison agreed with this decision and said the following. This cancellation decision was made on health, safety and good order grounds on the basis that it was in the public interest to do so. I welcome the decision to keep our borders strong and keep Australians safe. Many of the media reported that Djokovic's reason of ban was that he could stir up some anti-vax sentiment in the country. This is basically a fake news. Nothing like this was ever said by the officials. But we can take this as the main hypothesis of the real reason of the ban. Later, Djokovic went to the Federal Court of Australia and tried to appeal this decision, but this time unsuccessfully. The court basically assured that Minister of Immigration has a right to cancel visa for any reason, and it's not their job to assess whether this reason was valid or not. Djokovic's appeal was denied on January 16 and later he got deported from Australia and banned for the next 3 years to enter. Now my question is, why would Australian government approve everything at first and then cancel his visa 2 times? If they didn't like him for being an anti-vaxxer, they could have denied his visa in the first place or denied his medical exemption. The superficial answer is that Australia is a new China and there is no longer any kind of rule of law. It's basically a totalitarian leftist state who wants to publicly execute anti-vaxxer Djokovic. The problem with the theory is that Aussie government, Prime Minister and Minister of Immigration are coming from the Liberal Party, equivalent of Republican Party in the United States despite of the name. The equivalent of Democratic Party in Australia is called the Labour Party. They don't control the government, but they actually control the state of Victoria, where Melbourne is located and where Djokovic got his all initial approvals. That's very interesting. Maybe we are observing some kind of a political battle instead of simple anti-vaxxer deportation. Now let's look a bit closer at the entry requirements. Many countries in Europe explicitly allow to enter unvaccinated people if they have a COVID recovery certificate. Basically, you need to show that you were COVID positive within the last 180 days and at the moment you're COVID negative. This follows the science. However, in the United States and Australia, things work differently. The only way you can enter without a vaccine is to have a medical exemption. This is an extremely vague term. But there is an explanation on the Australian government website and we can read it. The only reasons you might be able to get an exemption from having a vaccine are if you, and then you have a list of different things, but previous COVID infection is not mentioned there. Then you have an explicit list of things which you won't get an exemption for. Again, previous COVID infection is not mentioned. This is all very confusing, but the problem is that this is not a law but just an explanation. The end decision is left to the doctor. If you look at Djokovic exemptions, one is coming from the Tennis Federation, this doesn't have any legal force, and another is coming from Victoria Health Authority, which has a legal force, but it's coming from the leftist state government, which is a political rival of federal right-wing government. We can safely assume that Victoria Health's government went too far with this exemption for Djokovic, and federal government got pissed off, especially considering that Djokovic openly tweeted about that right before taking that plane to Australia. Let me be clear, if you're a normal and vaxxed guy who wants to come to Australia, there are gonna be no any medical exemptions for you on the basis that you had COVID previously. Full stop. Victoria's state government found a loophole and allowed Djokovic to enter, which is not okay. My personal opinion is that COVID recovery certificate should be a valid replacement of the vaccine, but it's not the case in Australia right now. Making an exception for one guy clearly violates the rule of law. And from the political standpoint, federal government must intervene and stop this, no matter whether they like Djokovic or not. From the point of money and prestige of Australian government abroad, it would have been much better to allow Djokovic to play. But the Australian politicians care about voters first. And the voters want to have a strong government who doesn't allow the rival party to game the system. Basically, it's a dispute between federal and state level in Australia, between the right wing and the left wing, not any kind of witch hunt on anti-vaxxers. Australia had the strictest rule in the Western world in terms of COVID restrictions, and I personally would not like to live in the country like that. But if you look at the COVID stats and compare death per 1 million, you can see that in Australia it's only 107 and in the United States it's 2616. This is 26 times of a difference. Australian government made a very hard choice, which you might disagree with, but they were following it from the beginning to the end and they actually delivered the results. The politicians over there want to get a full credit for that, and sadly Djokovic fell victim in that process. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next time. Bye.